6K footage, RAM, and some stats to help you make a better decision on your next purchase. Welcome back to another video. My name is Nikos. Today we are talking about RAM once again. The reason being, somebody asked me about 6K footage and how that relates to the speeds and of course the latency and then the size or how much RAM you should be purchasing. Now, this is more geared towards creators, of course, and I have several videos I've created. I will be making a list of them and putting them all together so people can watch step by step so they can make a better, more informed decision on their purchase. I will leave all the links below, however, and of course you can search on the channel and find all of them below. So the idea here becomes, well, what if I'm using 6K? Now, when we're talking about 4K and we look at 4K as, hey, I'm going to import this into editing software and start using the different types of sequences and how complicated they get. The idea, of course, is, hey, let's look at how much RAM do we need overall, and then what is the speed, depending on what kind of system you're putting together or you're upgrading to. The thought process just comes into play of what am I actually using it on a use case scenario, what am I using, how am I using it, and what is the best for me on a budget. So time, energy, and money is what we're looking at. Now, the previous videos were on 4K, and we walked through the process of looking at the best case scenario of 3200, 3600, and then, of course, if you have one of the new AMD chips, then you might be looking at that 4000 chip, and is that worth it with the software that we use as creators? And the answer really, in a nutshell, is that 3200 to 3600 is the sweet spot. You don't need to be going above and beyond because the software isn't really efficient yet. It hasn't been coded to be efficient with the faster speeds anyways. Now, will that come down the road in the future? Yes, we're seeing that. At the same time, we're also seeing it in terms of the video card taking over a lot of things that the CPU normally processed. It's just, the video card is being coded now so that can take over and be used. This is why they're always saying, hey, you should be buying one of the, higher end cards with more RAM on that card, and that should do better for you if you're a creator. But at the end of the day, the question is, what are you actually creating? And as such, we have to look at it in terms of most people will be using 4K, and the new software updates that come out, every time something comes out, it's more optimized for the 4K with the video card. So keep this in mind as you're planning your purchase. Now with the 6K, what we see is still the CPU doing a lot of the work. And yes, the video card does do more work than it has before, but again, it is the CPU doing most of the work, and we're going to see this in the stats. The 6K footage comes from Blackmagic. I was doing some tests with the BRAW extension. Now, when you download these 6K clips, they are in BRAW format, so you have to use an extension they have for Premiere Pro, and then you're able to import these and use them. Testing wise, I went ahead and just created a 29-second clip, just did light color on it, just so I could see how it all flows. Now you can see when you are using 6K, and it is on a 4K screen, of course, but it's nice and smooth. I can't complain. Everything's running nice. This is on a 3060 Ti, so you're really like, you wouldn't know if you had a 3080 or 3090 or card in here. This is where we're at, and this is now running. It's nice and smooth. If we look at the other clips I use, I put them together, and literally what I did here was just color code them again. Very nice, very quick, and just wanted to make a second longer video that we're going to render. This brings us to the important question about the size of RAM. We got to look at this and ask ourselves, oh, how much do we actually need? And this is subjective. Do you go for 32 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes, or 128 gigabytes? It's subjective because any one of those could suit your needs. Now, with 4K, you want to have at least 32 gigabytes. When you go to 6K, it is good to look at that and say to yourself, is 32 enough, or can I just invest into it and get 64 gigabytes. 64 gigabytes will be more than enough. But we got to look at it from the perspective of you have your system and then you have your software and what you're doing with that software. This is one aspect, this whole, I'm going to be using 6K or 8K down the road, and do I need 64 gigabytes in that software? But then we also have the idea of the system. Now, in my perspective and how I looked at it, because there weren't a lot of videos out there, and there still aren't, about creators and all the big software and how much do you actually need, 128 gigabytes is what I went with. I could have gotten away with 64. I'm happy I went with 128. But 64 would have been working fine for me right now. Now, in peak times, I see it, and it's kind of like, thank God I got that 128, and I don't have to see any issues pop up because the RAM isn't 128 and a 64. This is like the idea of it, because I have so many softwares open, and in high peak times, I'm doing so many things, and it's just taking up a lot of RAM. On the other hand, okay, RAM recycles, and a 64 gigabytes is going to be more than enough for most people. You got to look at it and say to yourself, well, how am I using this? And when we're looking at the software, yeah, 6K will go in there. It's still going to drop back down to under 30 gigabytes when it's operating. When you start to scrub, it's going to increase. And I've seen that go up to like 60, 70 gigabytes. So the question then becomes, well, at 64 gigabytes, what happens is it starts to recycle, and it will climb up to whatever allocation of RAM you're giving the software. So in the case of Premiere Pro at 64 gigabytes, I've tested it out, and the reality is at 40 gigabytes, that will recycle nicely and you will be fine. Subjective again, your timeline. How busy is it? What is occurring there? So on the safe side, 128 gigabytes would be best, and it might be a good idea to start with 2 sticks and then expand to 4 sticks, going to 128 gigabytes when you need it. Now, with both clips, what I did was export them in .265 and .264 format. The reason I did this was because the questions came in on what format can we export in and what is quicker, what is better for 6K exports. Now, the thought process here is based on your actual project. You'd be looking at the requirements, and from the requirements, you would establish best case scenario. So you have to put that in your timing. We also have to remember that the different codecs work differently with the software and hardware on the computer. They're programmed differently, optimized differently, which means that the .265 and a 6K will be able to use the hardware accelerated feature with Premiere Pro, where the .264 does not. It's purely software. So we're going to see those results and how this affects the whole render time, and in general how RAM is affected in the timings. What we do find is that the 265 format is rendered quicker, and of course the 2666, this is non-XMP enabled, is taking the longest amount of time. Now, mind you, it's not that big of a difference because this is a 29-second clip, so you're not going to notice big timings, time differences with it, but you will see them. So we do see that drop at 3200 CL16, and then at 3600 CL18, you see a little bit of a drop and improvement, especially when you're looking at it from a .264 format. When we start to see these averages play out, at 3600 CL16 is probably the one that I noticed with the most amount of tests that I did. They averaged out the best. Now, the 3800 CL18, you would expect this to be a little bit higher, but again, it wasn't, and it averaged out to about 114, and you're sitting there going, okay, why is the case for this? Now, how do we realize what the case actually is? And we do see the results with the longer clip at 248. We actually see the big difference here. Now, I see a drop right away from the non-XMP into the XMP territory, and that's a good 45 seconds on the .265. For the H.264, you see over like a minute there difference, and then it starts to stabilize and start to flow out at a general decrease as we continue to go up to 3600 CL18 and then 3600 CL16. Now, on the 265, we don't see such a big difference. So you're not going to be getting that massive of a difference by having better, faster RAM. Do we see that with the 264? And yes, we do. We do see a general decrease as it moves forward, and the faster stick will be better. So why is this the case, and what do we see? Well, when you are running any kind of software, and we export, so if we export at 264 here, and we just bring in our performance charts, what we notice here automatically is that the GPU is doing around 42% and is sharing it with the CPU. And this is just going to be average. This is how it's going to be moving. And we're not going to see such big of a change where it's going to affect us whatsoever. Now, at this point, I'm doing this test on 128 because I've been doing the test. So that's why you're seeing 128. But in general, what you're going to see the same principle. It would just be 64 gigabytes here and you still have 29 as it was running. Now, the idea that I'm trying to share here is that you are seeing a general split between the two on the .265. However, if we stop this now and decide to just switch it to a 264 really quick and just do a quick export and bring the CPU and a GPU back in, what we do is a spike occur. And now the CPU has to process more data based on the codec that this is rendering in. What we also see is an increase in the NVIDIA card. Now, what can we conclude from this? This becomes more evident of how optimization is happening with the software. Now, the software is optimizing the video card more and more as we see it with 4K. Eventually, they'll be moving to 6K. But as it stands right now, we're seeing that the CPU takes off on the .264 and it is processing more data. So it's going to be sending more data to the RAM and back and forth. And that speed where we see it climb from 3600 to 3800 on that codec, yeah, it's worth it. Now, are you going to always be doing that? This is a question. You got to look at the different codecs and ask yourself, hey, what am I actually doing? Now, this is one part of it, because at the end of the day, if you're really put this into perspective, okay, you're going to be doing everything in terms of how the software and everything else, all the different softwares you use fit together. So not all of them will be 100%. So you're literally banking on the fact that I'll get the fastest I can, but then, you know, it doesn't mean that you're going to have the fastest for everything. Some of them are just optimized for the 3200 and some of them are 3600, and this is it. We're not at the stage of optimization where we can say, yeah, 4000 is the best. And we can clearly see that when we jump into that territory of 3600 on the .265, you are literally not gaining anything by going faster. On the .264, on the other hand, yeah, you do see that increase, but when you pass the 3600 CL16, you're not getting such a big increase where it's going to be life-changing and it's going to make your life so much better that you can't live without. So then the question just begs, what should you be buying? Well, the answer is very simple. What is your budget? And what can you do with your budget? Can you look at your budget and say to yourself, can I live without thinking about that 3600 to 3800 and go for the 3200? Now, at the end of the day, you're going to be looking at it and saying, can I overclock that 3200? Every motherboard should be able to get to some overclock, and 3600, to overclock it to 3600, even at the CL18, would be great for anybody that is going and buying a cheaper set of RAM. Now, at the end of the day, budget, time, energy, money plays the biggest role, because you're looking at it and saying, how much time am I losing? In my case, if I look back, the 3200 would have been fine. I would have just overclocked it and I'd be happy. But in the back of my mind, because nobody's done tests like this, I would have been like, well, you know, what if I had the 4000 or the 3800? What if I added and put more to the budget and went with a couple $100 more there? That's the bottom line with this. Now, the 128 gigabytes, that brings up another set of tests. I'm talking really more concrete now because I've seen a lot of them. I'm finishing them up tonight. I will have another video for that, and I will include some of this stats so we can compare things. But the overall idea that I'm trying to share with you is that your budget could go a lot further with other things, like a more hard drive space or a better video card, or maybe a faster chip if that's what you're looking at upgrading or buying a new system. My name is Nikos. Leave your questions, comments below, and of course, share this with anybody that is thinking about buying a computer for their content creation and looking at RAM and stressing out, because I know I was there, and a video like this would have definitely helped. Don't forget, check out these two videos.